Welcome to the first of 5 installments in our Coming to Canada virtual cemetery tour. This series is our way of celebrating Canadian Multiculturalism Day, which is coming up this Saturday, June 27th. We will be exploring Creston's diverse history through the stories of its earliest immigrants, who are buried right here at Forest Lawn Cemetery. This town, like the rest of the country, has been built upon a foundation of cultural diversity, beginning of course with the First Nations, and then with the newcomers who arrived much later on and continue to arrive to this day. In the late 1890s and early 1900s, the Canadian government was determined to fill up the vast Canadian West. The main reason for this was to extend Canadian hegemony across the continent and to fend off American expansionism. The government also sought a source for agricultural products for the major eastern cities, a ready market for the industrial products created in these cities, and a demand for the extensive transportation networks being established across the country. So when it came to settlers, those from Great Britain were the most sought after, but Northern and Western Europeans were also acceptable. You also had to have farming experience, or at least the desire to take it up. So consequently, shopkeepers, clerks, and other such professions were not as warmly welcomed, as they tended to congregate in the major eastern cities and were considered unfit for the pioneering lifestyle of the West. Many immigrants who did make their way to Creston found employment in the forestry and mining industries, as cheap labor was in high demand. So for our first stop, we have John Zakotnik, who was born in Austria and served in the army for 4 years. He married in 1898 and immigrated alone to South America and the US. In 1909, he made his way to Canada, first to Brandon, Manitoba, and then to Priestville, Saskatchewan the following year, where his wife and family joined him at his homestead. They moved to Canyon in 1924. So John Zakotnik's story is similar to many other early settlers in 2 ways. So for one, he moved around a great deal before finally settling in Canyon. And 2, he immigrated alone, first establishing himself before sending for his family. Though Southern Italians were considered poorly suited to farming, over 60,000 of them came to Canada between 1900 and 1913 to fill the demand for cheap labor. Gus de Gusti was part of this wave. He was born in Italy and immigrated to Canada in 1907, joining his brother in Kelowna. He worked in many restaurants in various communities, even owning his own restaurant in Calgary, before coming to Creston in 1950, where he worked at the Bus Depot Cafe. Michael and Eleanor Talarico were also part of this wave of Italian laboring immigrants. Michael was born in Attilia, Italy in 1909 and immigrated with his parents to Creston in 1915. His wife, Eleanor, was born in Alberta to Italian parents. In Creston, most Italian immigrants worked with the railway, and the Talaricos were no exception. Michael worked as a foreman, telegrapher, and station agent in Fernie in Creston up until 1967, when he and Eleanor were unfortunately killed in a car accident. Daniel Kernel was born in northern Italy, the cutoff point of undesirable versus desirable settlers in terms of their perceived suitability for farming. He arrived at the major eastern port of New York in 1907 and was promptly advised by an immigration officer to drop the L-O at the end of his last name, changing the pronunciation from the very Italian sounding Colonello to the more English Kernel. He intended to join his uncle at the Fernie coal mines, but it took him several years to arrive there from New York. He married Doris Shaw, the daughter of English immigrants, and owned a coal mine near Edinburgh, Alberta. He later took up farming in that area before coming to Creston in 1943. So now that we have a better idea as to why the Canadian government encouraged immigration to the West, we ought to shift our focus to the reasons why these individuals wish to do so. Join us tomorrow as we explore what motivated Creston's early cultural communities to make this long and difficult journey.